When Angelia was 18 years old, she ran away from her home in Dallas to start a new life in Houston. With family issues at home, she contacted an old friend who gave her a place to stay. With a petite figure, blue eyes, and long blonde hair, Angelia's friend convinced her to try modeling. During her third photo shoot, an organized abduction was secured by her friend, beginning the impression of lack of freedom. Angelia was threatened daily and lived in inhumane systems. All these events led her to not recognize herself, leaving behind a broken soul. Hello, I'm Kayla Burke. Today we will discuss how human trafficking, known as modern-day slavery, is becoming a severe problem in the United States, specifically in Houston. First, we will analyze the large sex trafficking industry in our country. Then we will examine the growing problem of forced labor. Finally, we will explore how forced marriage is a form of coercion in our communities. Whether it is a stranger on the street or a loved one, everyone is a potential victim to becoming displayed on a missing persons flyer. Growing up in the city of Houston, I have come across people who have worked in small businesses that have fallen victim to human trafficking. With a basic understanding of the human trafficking epidemic, let's look at one of the most common forms of human trafficking, which is sex trafficking. Traffickers use a variety of methods to lure their victims into sex trafficking situations. Traffickers capture their victims, both minors and adults, who are vulnerable to sex trafficking with false promises. Like Angelia, women and young girls can be offered jobs such as waitressing, dancing, or models. Some of the traffickers work under the name of agencies. However, the individuals who arrive to these services are threatened and sold into the sex industry. Human trafficking for sex from the End Slavery Now database, launched in 2009, said that supply and demand have increased throughout the years, partially due to the internet and the ease with which traffickers and customers can discreetly complete a transaction. Traffickers utilize social media and dating sites. Ads seemingly posted by a person or willingly engaged in the sex trade are often monitored by traffickers. These websites are one of the ways that traffickers can find their victims. Also, the sex trafficking victims face physical and mental abuse from the perpetrators. But look beneath the surface from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services from 2002 states that sex traffickers use a variety of methods to condition their victims, including starvation, confinement, beatings, rapes, and physical abuse. After being under coercive control, the victims may suffer from traumatic bonding, where the victim fears for their life. According to sex trafficking, uses victims for commercial sex. A bonded laborer works under the threat of a penalty. Bonded labor occurs when an employer takes advantage of a victim's vulnerable state. ILO indicators of forced labor from the International Labor Organization from 2020 states that indicators can include abuse or vulnerability, deception, restriction of movement, isolation, and physical and sexual abuse. Furthermore, the same source emphasizes that bonded labor occurs more likely in cases of multiple needs from the employer. The worker may depend on the employer for needed housing and food. Deceptive recruitment includes false promises of the type of work or living condition. But once work starts and the working conditions do not uphold expectations, workers become trapped. In this case, workers did not give free consent to work. If the worker saw the reality beforehand, he or she would have never taken the job. While bonded labor is hard to identify, forced marriages is another form of modern slavery that may go unnoticed. Forced marriages occurs when a person does not freely consent to marriage and the victim is subjected to pressure or coercion. Forced marriages from the Stop the Traffic organization reported in 2020 states that forced marriage is mostly commonly by family members because A. The family wants to preserve wealth inside the family, or family members want to control sexuality or unwanted relationships. The family wants to preserve the chastity and honor. Or the same source that reported that common signs might include the following: become depressed and helpless. They stop spending time with their peers and won't reply to messages or phone calls. The person appears with bruises as the family uses violence to pressure the victim. And they withdraw from school, their education. Human trafficking is a severe epidemic. Let's discuss what we know. The United States contains a billion-dollar criminal industry of sex trafficking, forced labor, and forced marriage. Most victims lack rights to basic services, making them particularly vulnerable. First, we learned how sex trafficking is prominent in our area. Then we reviewed how forced labor is a growing local problem. Finally, we discovered how forced marriage leads to permanent exploitation. After a local church rescued Angelia, she was described as petrified and shaky. During her time in rehabilitation, Angelia was encouraged to learn basic manners and attend college classes. Overall, the fear of human trafficking promotes a lack of freedom and negatively impacts our communities. Angelia deserved better than to have her life taken for granted at a young age. Although many never make it home, being aware can help future victims. Thank you for your time and attention.